So one of the big announcements that was, surprisingly announced at D23 over the weekend was the fact that Brad Bird came out himself to confirm this, um, that basically they are working on Incredibles 3. And a lot of people were excited about this because when you look at the first two Incredibles movies, yeah, Incredibles 2 wasn't as good, but it was still, decent enough that one could say the long wait was, worth it. But now we're getting Incredibles 3. Now I know the memes and the jokes are going to, float about the internet of, okay, how long is it going to take for this one to come out? But I think if they're already saying, hey, we're working on it, and they got promotional posters saying coming soon, then that to me is a good sign. Although they didn't say what coming soon means. Does it mean next year? Does it mean 2026? Does it mean 2027? We don't know. But with the posters saying coming soon, that is a good sign to say the least. That basically means that it is heading our way. They just haven't set a release year or date. But the other question that comes around with Incredibles 3 is, what do you do next? I mean, you had Syndrome as your villain, in the first one, basically a young fan of Mr. Incredible that felt rejected and basically went on a mission to essentially, disown all heroes because Mr. Incredible wouldn't let him be his sidekick and such. And that he wanted to basically prove anybody could be a hero with the right technology, and everything. And, look what good that did him. And then, of course, in the second film, we had this woman, disguise herself. Or I don't know if it was her or her brother or somebody, but this woman have a disdain for heroes because they didn't save her parents. And she used some kind of mesmerizing machine to hypnotize them into serving her, beck and call and basically make themselves look bad. Now, the one thing I always take away from that is she had Elastigirl, Mrs. Incredible, under her control, someone that's able to shape her body into whatever she wants. Now, I know Disney probably wouldn't have done this because maybe it would have been a little too borderline for Disney when it comes to these movies, but still, I'm kind of surprised that she didn't have a moment to where she would have Elastigirl, form into a snake, kind of shapeshift into a snake a little bit and just, swirl around her while she's still hypnotized and she pets her head kind of while she's gloating about what she's, been doing to, like, let's say, Mr. Incredible before she hypnotized him. Now, with that said, we know that the kids were kind of like the heroes for the parents at that time, at that juncture. The question is, what do they do next for Incredibles 3 when it comes to the family, comes to the other heroes, especially the kids? Now, one thing Brad Bird made perfectly clear about the second film is it took place immediately. Well, I wouldn't say immediately, but it took place just around, the end of the first film. Because remember, in the first film, at the end of that, we had this mole guy start to invade the city, and that's where the second film takes place in. But yeah, or takes place, at the beginning of, I should say. But yeah, basically, the second film, begins just around the end of the first film, but not exactly. I mean, you get the battle with the mole guy and everything, but then you kind of fast forward by a couple of months. And that's the one question a lot of people have is, okay, if you're doing a third film and the cast is getting older and you've already had to recast Dash, in the second film, as well as Violet, what are you going to do here? Are you just going to follow the same routine where it's in the same timeline and the third film takes place after the second film? What's it going to be? And I think, honestly, this might be where Brad Bird, now under, the guise of Bob Iger and, and everything there, I think this might be where Brad Bird and his crew do take into consideration, the fact that the voice cast, Craig T. Nelson, Helen Hunt, I think, is the voice of I think Helen Hunt's the voice of Miss Incredible, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. That, they're not getting any younger. Lawrence Fishburne, or Samuel L. Jackson, whoever is the voice of Frozone, they're not getting any younger. And they can't keep constantly, like I said, hiring in new voice actors, young voice actors to voice the kids. So I believe this might be where Brad Bird is like, okay, we do need to, move the continuity and move the continuity forward in the timeline. We need to age up the kids so that they can be the next generation of heroes. Because if there was one common denominator when it came to the Incredibles in the first film and somewhat in the second, was they always wanted to try to, pass, the baton to the new generation, to the next generation. Now, they didn't straight out say that, but you could tell during certain moments and certain quotes and sayings and everything that, they were alluding to, hey, the next generation, which consists of, Dash and Violet and Jack and other young children of superheroes, they want to make sure that everything is ready for them and set to go for them to take on that baton and move forward with making heroes, pretty much, not just everyday citizens, but also make heroes, people that citizens can trust, they can depend on, that they can, be thankful for and all that. And I believe Brad Bird and his crew are finally going to go that route. I believe this might be, that moment. Now, if they do come out and say, oh, yeah, we're just going to follow the same formula as the second film, and it's just going to take place months after the second film, it's going to be the same timeline as the second film, okay, fine. But again, your main voice cast, your main VAs for the parents, Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl, Mrs. Incredible, they're not getting any younger. They're not getting any younger. I mean, I have figures in my closet. A pack of Mr. Incredible and Mrs. Incredible that bounce off each other through the electronic voices. And even through there, you could tell that it's the actual VA actors from the movie, but you could tell that they're getting older. You could tell that the voices are aging as they are. So it's not going to be so easy to try to keep things in the same timeline, with the same continuity with the voice actors. And again, like I said, and others have pointed this out, you can't keep hiring young kids to be the voices, and I do apologize for that notification there. That was a vibration notification. I do apologize for that. But again, that was an email notification, by the way. But again, you can't keep hiring, young voice actors to keep voicing Dash and Violet and maybe even Jack, because eventually fans are going to notice that, hey, that does not sound like Dash from the second film. That does not sound like Violet from the second film. They're going to notice that. So I think, hopefully, Brad Bird has taken all that criticism that he got with the second film. Because, yes, people understood, all right, he's pretty much confirmed it takes place after the first film. Okay, that's fine, that's good. But hopefully he's taken the criticism that they've given to him with that second film, where people have asked or wondered, okay, we understand why he did it this way, but why couldn't he just age up, have it take place years later and age up the kids by a little bit? He's going to take those criticisms and he's going to hopefully move forward with them. That's why I think when they made the announcement that, hey, we are doing Incredibles 3, they didn't go into further detail as to what Incredibles 3 is going to be, whether or not it's going to be in the same timeline. It's going to be the same continuity, but they didn't, say, okay, it's going to be in the same timeline. It could be years later. It could be, hell, Incredibles 3, you know what they could do with that? They can make it a prequel. Yeah, they can make it a prequel, and we wouldn't even know it. We wouldn't even know it, but they can make it a prequel, and that's a fact. I know that sounds strange, but a lot of movies have been known to do that. They have been known to take a sequel, make it a prequel. I mean, look what's going on with Mufasa. That's a sequel to The Lion King, the live action Lion King, right? It takes place. It's got the same characters at the beginning, but it's also serving as a prequel because it's an origin story of Mufasa being told by Rafiki. And thus, when you have that kind of a premise, and I'm just shutting the windows here, I'm going to put the cooler on a little bit. My mom likes to have it turned on if it gets a little close to 83. Hold on for a sec. While I pause this. Hold on for a second. Had to reach over and, shut my window. But anyway, you look at, Mufasa, the Lion King, and everything. And, pretty much it serves as a prequel, because the way it begins, it'll feel like a sequel, but then it goes into that origin story of Mufasa, and thus it becomes a prequel. So they could do that with Incredibles 3, too. They could do something, I wouldn't say a flashback like, oh, here's Mr. Incredible telling his grandkid or Jack about how they became heroes and all that. It doesn't have to be something like that. But it could be something to where maybe you have, Helen, which is voiced by Helen Hunt, I believe, or something like that. Again, let me know who the voice actress is. I get them confused. Maybe it's Bonnie Hunt, I don't know. But anyway, you could have Mr. Incredible and Mrs. Incredible maybe in the senior years, flashing back to the days when they first started. Realizing that, hey, maybe their time on this planet is not for much long, and they're going to want to reminisce of how they first met. That might be how it happens. We don't know. But I do believe Brad Bird and his crew, especially under Bob Iger, they're realizing, hey, we can't do the same thing we did with the second film and say, hey, it takes place immediately after the first film, because honestly, it's going to be like, yeah, are you going to just keep, honestly, it's going to be like, in the eyes of all folks, yeah, are you just going to keep doing that time and time and time and time and time again? People are going to get sick of it. They're going to get sick of it. So I think, honestly, Brad Bird, and I know I'm sounding very repetitive here, but I honestly believe he is going to take a lot of what's been given to him critical-wise from the second film, the praise and some of the critical tweaks that need to be made, and he's going to be like, okay, fine, I get it. My voice crew or the voice acting crew I have representing the family and the other characters are not getting any younger. So fine, we'll move forward. But now the question comes up, okay, if you move forward, with it, you go years, maybe a decade in advance, with, the kids being aged up and all that. How do you play around with these? How do you play around with the story, and how do you play around with them, and their powers evolving as they grow? Well, with Violet, even though I know it'd be a PG film, Violet, I think, could have a lot of fun with whoever, I should say, is her love interest. Because we know by then she should have a love interest. She should have a boyfriend by then. But then again, in this woke world, and I say it with all due respect, you never know what could happen. But with Disney kind of realizing, yeah, maybe the woke direction isn't the best way to go, hopefully we don't have to deal with that with Incredibles 3. But anyway, I could see Violet, being, out of college, basically, being a superhero and everything, but having a love interest and having a little fun with that love interest by disappearing, going invisible, playing hide and seek, trying to catch me if you can, going under the covers, kind of giving the illusion, even in a kid's film or family film, that she's naked under there in the most clean, Disney-fied way. And maybe you have her do a little bit of a striptease, but very Disney-fied striptease for her love interest. Again, I'm not saying they would do that, but we don't know when the movie will come out, and who knows by then whether or not they'll be okay with that, if you catch my drift. Now, Dash, I can understand, basically could be somebody, as he gets older, he could become the rebel. He could become like, somebody that wants to do his thing, he wants to do his thing his own way. Like being a hero, having super speed, he realizes he can be able to, save a day, stop a crime in no time flat. but he might also want to do it in a way that he feels justice really needs to be served. And to me, Dash has always given off that vibe of, even in the second film, I don't know, I can't remember if he'd done it in the hold on, let me correct myself. Sorry about that. I almost got tongue-tied, and I'm also doing this while my mom was out getting her hair cut, and I want to try to take this opportunity to get some content to you guys since I didn't do it yesterday. But anyway, Dash, like I said, I could see him being the rebel type, the rebellious type, to where, he knows he's got the speed to save the day, stop a crime, just like that and everything, or almost just like that. But I could also see him being someone that's like, yeah, I can do all this, but I also want to do it my way. I want to do it in a way to where I can ensure the criminals that, or the supervillains that want to threaten this world, threaten the city, reconsider. So you might have him want to borderline, or straddle that borderline of what being a true hero is. They could go that route with an older Dash. And to me, I think it could work. I think it could really work. I mean, as I was trying to say before I got a little tongue-tied there, and again, like I said, I'm trying to do this while my mom is out getting her hair cut and, trying to get content out to you guys. That's why I'm always looking out the front window, because I don't know when she's going to show up. But anyway, like I was trying to say before I got tongue-tied, we saw a little bit of that rebellious side, even as a kid in the first film, and I think we saw a little bit of it in the second film as well. So to me, I think that, that could play a factor in an older Dash. I think that could really play a factor. And I could see Violet, even though she would have fun with her powers and her love interest and all that, doing what I mentioned earlier, I could see her maybe with an older Jack, because, he's got to be aged up, being like the voice of reason for Dash. Like, you could have Dash somewhat become like the villain, but not totally a villain. Like, yeah, you're going to have your true villain, your true antagonist. But in this case, Dash could be in that circumstance of borderline what a real hero is, borderline what a real hero is, basically, to where he's either a hero with villain tendencies, or he's a hero that, does it the right way and doesn't cross, the line too much. Kind of be like I guess you could say like the Robin or the Red Hood, the Jason Todd, if you will, for the Incredibles, but very Pixar and Disney-fied, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I honestly believe they have a lot that needs to be changed, if you will, for the better when it comes to Incredibles 3. Because again, Brad Bird, and hopefully he has, and I believe he has, is going to take what a lot of people have been saying, even with the second film, despite it being good. He's going to take that criticism and he's going to say, okay, fine, I get it. Let's move, the timeline forward, keep it in the same continuity, timeline forward, age up the kids, and go from there. And again, you can have the third film serve as a passing of the baton, a passing of the torch from the older generation of heroes, Mr. Incredible, Mrs. Incredible, Elastigirl, that is, Frozone and everything. You can have it passed on to that generation in that film. And maybe you could set the tone for maybe a fourth film that will mainly be the new generation of kids, that you don't have to worry about Mrs. Incredible or, Mr. Incredible or Frozone being in there, maybe except for cameos. You could set it up for a fourth film, or you could set it up for a Disney Plus Disney Channel series, to where basically you can have episodes, 10 episodes, 8 episodes, whatever, focusing on this new generation of heroes, taking that torch that's been passed to them and running with it as best they could. It's possible. It's possible. But to me, honestly, I do agree that Incredibles 3 has to change. It really does. And if you're going to involve the parents, that's fine too. Have them involved in everything, that'd be great. Honestly, I would love to see Mrs. Incredible have a little bit more fun with her powers, because we only got a taste of that somewhat in both movies. But I'd like to see her have a little bit more fun at home, not just with Mr. Incredible, but maybe with Jack, or maybe with, her kids and all that. But, just have a little, maybe even on her own, but we'll see. Let me know if she had a little fun with her powers in the second film. I can't remember if she did or not. But yeah, I would love to see her have a moment like that to where, yeah, she'll still do some heroing, but she'll also kind of be more like at home, having fun, with a kid, with Jack, because he's getting older, and with her husband, and, you get the idea. But, I would love to see her do that a little bit more in the third film. But again, I think her role would basically be that of someone that's going to help pass that torch on to her daughter, onto her son, and everything, to be the next generation of heroes. And again, as I've mentioned before, with Dash and his rebellious side and everything, we've kind of seen hints of that in both films. Where basically it's like Elastigirl, Helen, is setting Violet up to be the one that becomes that leader, becomes the torchbearer for the new generation. So I could see her being in the film, having fun with her powers, being the hero that she's meant to be. Same with Mr. Incredible, but I could see them being limited. In that, as well. I can see them being limited in the heroing, maybe because they're getting older, and even being heroes, it kind of catches up to you. That'd be something they could do. Like I said, they can also do an origin story, to where we see an older, very older versions of the parents, maybe with their kids and everything, and their kids, and they're reminiscing of how they first became heroes and everything. I could see that happening. I could see that. I could see that, and I think it would work. I think it honestly could work. There's no doubt. I could also see them playing around with an idea that because Helen and Mr. Incredible are, heroes, that the powers have prevented them from aging. Like, you could have the kids aged up, but you can have the kids question, Mom, Dad, why haven't you guys aged? Why do you still look the way you have? You can have that finally come up. And that's when you can basically get maybe from what's her name, that costume designer, whatever she is. I can't think. You think I know what her name is, right? You think I know what her name is, right? But anyway, you could have that costume lady, Edith, or whatever her name is. You could have her maybe explain to them, maybe with a new character, as a scientist explaining as well, that the reason Mr. Incredible and Mrs. Incredible have, age-wise, they've gotten older, but physically they still look young. And I do apologize for that notification there too, guys. That's an email notification again. I do apologize. But explain to them that the reason they still look young and all that, even though they've gotten older age-wise, is because of their powers. And that could be something that'd be an interesting plot to explore. Like, okay, the powers that, Mr. Incredible have, Mrs. Incredible have, Frozone has, it's the reason it's keeping them young or young looking, even though they've, age-wise, number-wise gotten older, basically it's because there's something in the chromosome, or there's something in the and whatever gave them their powers and everything, some kind of XYZ situation, to where, yeah, you'll get older, but you're always going to look young. You're always going to look young. Kind of like, let's say, what Nicodemus told Mrs. Frisbee in Secret of Nim. That, with Jonathan, because of what happened to them, he would have remained young while she got old. Now, I'm not saying they would do that, but the storyline-wise that they could use, plot-wise, is they could also have the kids wondering, wait a minute, so that means when we get to a certain point, we still look the way we are, but we'll just be older in age. So basically, you can kind of tell, you can have the third story be around superheroes being immortal. And maybe there's a resentment if, once word gets out that, hey, some of these heroes can be immortal. They could outlive us. You can have a resentment there with the humans. Like, wait a minute. So you guys can live forever just about, but us, we go to dust? That could be something to be played with. But we'll have to see. But that's one of the scenarios. Again, the three scenarios I think Brad Bird could work with in the third film is it could be about passing the baton to the next generation of heroes, Violet, Dash, Jack, and all the other kids are superheroes, with the revolving subplot of Dash being a rebellious hero, wanting to do things certain ways, but borderlining being a villain and all that, doing it villainously and not hero-wise. I could see them doing that, as a subplot for the story. I could see them doing that as a subplot to that story, but also it being a story of passing the baton, the torch, as well. I could also see it being an origin story of how the Mr. and Mrs. Incredible became heroes, how they met Frozone and everything, what the first mission was. And I could see it being told, maybe similar to what the Mufasa movie's going to do, but differently, to where it's like maybe around the holidays and the grandkids want to know, hey, how did you become heroes and everything? So I could see that. And I could also see it, being a story to where it's about immortality and the humans finding out that, these heroes that have these powers, they're going to almost live forever while we just go to extinction. And that's not going to sit well, and that won't sit well with them. So those are 3 plot points I can see them working with when it comes to this, this movie, this third film. But we'll have to see. But I do believe Brad Bird is going to move forward in the timeline, keep the same continuity, but age up the kids and all that as well. And that's for 2 of the scenarios, 2 of the movies. I should say, or the two of the plot points I believe he'll, focus on. But I also believe that if he doesn't do those 2, he'll probably do an origin story, but do it in a way to where it's, Helen and Bob as grandparents now telling the grandkids how it all began for them. So I can see that. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are on Incredibles 3. Which of the 3 scenarios you think could happen? Do you agree with my, theories as to where I think they will go with it? How do you feel about it? And when do you think it will actually come out? So until next time, comment down below. Click on the link to, click on the link to go to my Teespring store for merchandise you can't get anywhere else, as well as the link to the other areas where you can find my content. But until then, next time, guys, let me know what your thoughts are, and I'm out.